Well, hey y'all, we are doing something really fun today. We're doing holiday cards. Here's an example of something I did earlier in the week using mixed media. So we're using acrylics, gold calligraphy ink, and watercolors, and also our art gum. So just to go over what we'll need today to make these beautiful cards, we're going to want to reach for our big wash brush. And then any kind of small detail brush you want to use, just make sure it has a small little tiny tip on it. And then we're going to use our palette knives, these two right here. And then of course we're going to reach for our art gum or your masking fluid, some people call it gum, some people call it fluid. And then use the little trash brush I gave you guys, because it's going to end up in the trash eventually because it will ruin your brush. That's why I don't want y'all using expensive stuff. And of course our gold ink. All right, and then for the acrylics, I just need you guys to use a white acrylic today, and then also we're going to pick up a yellow, and then we're going to mix it with a blue to make a really rich holly bush kind of green, indicative of like Christmas bushes and stuff. Here is our hooker's green, our crimson hue, and it's the alizarin, and this is the ultramarine. And those are going to be the watercolors we use today. Now, first what we're going to do is we're going to use our art gum. So what you need to do is go ahead and get your art gum out, open up that top, and remember not to leave it open for too long. So we're going to mix it. Before we mix it, actually, we're going to use our Dawn dish soap or any kind of dish soap you want. And we're going to prep our brush. So you get in there, smush it around on the bristles really, really good. Okay, it looks pretty coated. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put it in the jar that's going to be your dirty water. And just rinse it off real good. You don't have to worry about doing too much with it. As long as it has most of the Dawn soap off of it, it won't affect your paint. So what it's going to do is just protect the bristles from the gum, and then dry that off on a clean paper towel, pretty dry, like as much as dry as you can get it. Okay, and then you're going to take that open bottle of art gum solution. Okay, open it back up, and you're just going to take the other end of your brush and you're going to mix it, because this does separate. Okay, so there we go, we're mixing it up. And make sure to like pick it up, look at the end of it. There's no clumps or lumps on the end, then you're good to go. Okay, and I usually just wipe it off on my paper towel, and it's good, it's not sticky or anything. So then I want you to take your art gum solution, and I want you to create, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. We're making a moon, and again, this is more like of the impressionistic kind of intuitive watercolor kind of look. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it kind of off to the side, top right. And then you're just going to go in and put little dots for like snowflakes. So put them wherever you like, or you could, if you wanted to, you could put a toothbrush in there and get some and splatter it if you want a more sporadic look. It is quite messy, and I was already making a huge mess today, and I didn't feel like cleaning it up again. So I just stuck with the dots. And you can make varying size of dots, but just go ahead, put them all over the page, probably more, around the moon in the sky than down at the bottom, because, well, you'll see why. So we've got a few spread out at the bottom. All right, and I think we're getting close to being done here. All right, now we're going to start a road. So what I'd like you to do is start a little square kind of in the middle of the page, or a line rather, just as straight as line as you can. And you can also draw a line with a pencil if you wanted to, because we've done that before with a ruler. If you want to get real particular with it, that's totally fine. It probably will look nicer than what I'm about to do. But this is just one of those fun exercises, just to see if I could make it work. And I did it earlier, and I was like, oh gosh, this would be a fun exercise for the ladies to do too. And they might even like it so much they'll use it as a Christmas card. So we're just making a little road here. And of course, it's a little wider than at the front than it is at the back because it's, you know, a distance. So that's kind of where our horizon is. It's the top of that road. Okay. All right. And remember, if you're not using your masking fluid, please put the top back on because it will dry out. And so what I'm going to do now is just wash out my brush. So I'm going to go back in and you'll see that Dawn dish soap actually cleans it up really quickly. The soap kind of becomes more milky looking. You can tell it's getting all the junk and the masking fluid off. Rinse it off. And this one, give it a good rinse and like smush it in there real good at the bottom of the cup. Just to make sure you get everything off. And then look, clean as a whistle. Love it. So this is a fun little hack that I learned that I found very useful when working with that product in particular. Okay, so now, you know, I have no patience. I'm going to dry it with a hairdryer. And it won't take very long because there's not a ton of masking fluid on the page. It's pretty thin and those dots are pretty tiny. So it won't take super long. Yep, that's pretty dry. See, didn't take long at all. Just about 30 seconds, I guess. And so once it feels tacky to the touch, that means it's dry and it's not coming off on your finger. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a clean wash brush. And what I would like for you to do is to start towards the top and work your way towards the top of that road where your horizon is. Okay, and we're just soaking the page. It's not like super, you know, pooling and dripping wet, but we are going to get it good and damp. And remember, this is 100% cotton, so it's going to soak up your water. It's thirsty. It's a thirsty page, so it's going to soak it up pretty quickly. So just make sure as you're working down towards the bottom, or actually where the road meets the horizon, just make sure that you've got an equal amount of water on the page. And sometimes I'll even go in and just reinforce the water right at the horizon because we do want it to be pretty wet down there as we're going to start from that vantage point in the painting. Okay. And kind of, you can see I'm kind of like going back up the page a little bit and double checking to make sure that's nice and damp, but especially right there at the road. Okay, now we're going to move on to our ultramarine. So you can see I've put a nice little dollop there on my faux palette. I actually have paint on my palette right now that I don't want to mess with because it's a certain mix of colors. So I just used a little paper plate. That's perfect if you're going to do something like this. So what I'm doing is I'm going back in to really make sure that that horizon is nice and damp, pretty darn wet. And that's going to be important because what we're going to be doing after we've gotten everything where we want it water control wise. Okay, I'm just moving everything up the page. There we go. We're going to take our palette knife, the square one, okay, it's that straight edge, or one that's got a nice straight edge on it, and we're going to drag it through that paint. Okay, there's no water on my brush, or on my palette knife, there's no water in the paint. It's just right out of the tube. And what we're going to do is make straight lines right up and down all along that tree line. Cool, right? So we're just going to keep doing that, moving things around. Okay. So just take your palette knife and make lines. And then if you have extra paint on the front or back, go ahead and go in the midst of the trees, okay? And just kind of, you know, give it a little flat edge and watch it move around because it is pretty damp, so it'll move still. Okay, and then I want to take that spray bottle because it's a little too stark for my taste. So I'm just going to spritz it, okay? Then I'm going to go back in and try to move that paint around a little bit more. So this is what's great about this, is if it is too dry, you can always go back in with more water, okay? And I'm just steadily moving this along, making nice little stripes here and there. Okay, and then this is the best part, going right in at the edge of that horizon. Okay, what it does is it adds another depth, I guess, depth perception. Really, it looks like it's like the brush or the bush, like at the edge of a forest. Okay, and it just helps it just helps define shapes better when you have that. So again, I'm just going to move in and do as many trees as I want. Don't worry if this edge kind of scratches into your paper and makes an indentation. That will look beautiful. It's going to look so cool. Okay. So, and don't worry about that either. If you get a little bit that comes down, totally fine. We're going to fix that later. Okay. So we're going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. Okay, so after I've gotten my water where I want it on the page, just make sure it was nice and damp still. I just go back in and do exactly what I did on the other side. I use the flat part of the knife and I just make those trees as short or as tall as I'd like. And then if I have extra paint on the back, I just go in and add it to the bottom. And then I wanted to go spritz it again because I like a more diffused look when I'm painting these trees, just more dreamy. And again, as you can see, there's a little bit that's kind of coming below that horizon line. But like I said, don't worry, because what we're about to do is we're about to take our flat brush again, and we're going to go in at the bottom and work to the top of that horizon with water. Okay, so that's all we're doing, just making it nice and damp. And then as you can see, we're getting pretty close to where that paint's moving down. But again, not a problem because we're actually going to use that paint, and I kind of want it to do that. It also can make a really nice shadow for the forest. Okay, so we're gonna move up. All right, and now I'm getting into that paint. So watch what I do here. I just very gently go in and touch the bottom of that paint. Okay, so the rest of it starts to move. Okay, do the same on the other side. And here comes more paint. Oh, I just love when it does that. It's like a cascade of color. And so what I'm gonna do is just gonna use that extra paint to color in the ground. Real gently, just move it around where I want it. And again, you're not going to use any more paint at this point. We're just moving around what's already there. Okay, and now we're going to do, again, we're going to go up to the top of the page with water, and we're going to kind of do a similar thing that we did to the bottom. Obviously there's no paint at the top to drag down, but what we're going to do is just create more of a damp situation up top. And then I just want you to take a tiny bit of paint and dilute the heck out of it. So you see on my palette here, it is very, very light, very watery. Okay. All right. And just, that's about the color you want your paint at. And so you're going to go in and just start dabbing. And I would love for you to focus around the moon, okay? Or like on top of the moon, wherever, just so that you can give that moon a really good pop, a really great contrast. And then you move out from there and create a little more like cloud texture in the sky, just a little darker. Go back and add some more paint, and just remember, it's always going to dry down lighter than you think it will. So as I said, look, there's some clouds there. We're just going in and creating as much texture as we can in the sky. Okay, I'm really happy with how this is looking. So what I'm going to do is just dry it real quick. And again, we're not working with a ton of water this time. It's not soaking wet, so it won't take very long to dry. But you absolutely must dry your page completely before you take your masking fluid off with your eraser, the masking fluid eraser. If you do not, you have a really good chance of ripping your paper and tearing up the colors, beautiful colors you just put down. So that's what we're doing today. We're just gonna make sure everything's good and dry before we attempt to take it off. So here we go with our eraser that I gave you guys on the first, I think our first class together. And I just want you to gently rub. You don't have to rub hard. You don't even have to use this if you want. You can use your finger. It's a textural thing for me. I don't love it, so that's why I use the eraser, and I gave you guys one just in case. But just go lightly over your page wherever you see the dots, and sometimes they kind of blend in because it is a blue color. So just go ahead and go over the entire page with a little bit of a good rub. And you should definitely start seeing these beautiful little white negative space snowflakes as you go along. And there you have it. So at this point, you could be totally done. Or if you're like me, you like to fiddle with the details. And you could do it again on your own and not even put the road in. I mean, you could do this a million times over and get a different result every time. But I'm missing a few things that my eye wants to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with just a little bit of water and a little bit of paint on my brush. I'm not doing a huge deal. I'm not using the palette knife this time. I'm just going back in with that detail brush that we talked about earlier. So I've got a good amount of water, okay? And again, I'm not making like crazy dark trees here. I'm just gonna do just a couple trees on each side. I just think it needs a little more definition. So if you wanted to at this point, you could do that. Just go in very lightly and sketch out some trees, just the tree trunks, and then go back in with a touch of water if you wanted to diffuse it or spritz it. You can totally do that and then dry it all over again. Won't hurt anything. Okay, I am happy with that. And so we are finished. Look at that. I love how that has different gradients of color. Some of it's more diffused, some of it's more defined, and then you have the negative space. It's just a fun little card you could easily make to send to someone you love. You could even get it photocopied if you loved it that much and make that your holiday card. Just a fun idea. So next what we're going to do is we're going to grab our hooker's green, okay, and our flat brush. And what we're going to do is just take clean water in that flat brush, and we're really going to do, again, we're just going to really dampen the page. Again, it's not completely soaked, but it's pretty damp. So because what we want our colors to do when it hits the page is diffuse, and what we're going to do is just create a beautiful green backdrop to start with for what we're going to be doing. Okay, and so with our background, what we're going to do is we're just going to take our paint, and it's not super diluted, okay? But you do see that once it hits the page, because it is so wet, that's when it dilutes, that's when it creates that beautiful cloudy thing that we love so much with watercolor background textures. So just kind of tap, tap, tap away. We're not necessarily brushing too much, we're just kind of tapping here and there, smushing it around. Doesn't have to be particularly, I don't know, defined. It's just, we're just creating color on the page. And if you could, make sure that you have a higher concentration of green towards the middle, because that's going to help us really make some of the other colors we're adding later pop. Okay, so I'm loving that color. So now we're gonna blow dry for just a minute. And probably just a minute because it doesn't take very long because we didn't like soak the page. But doesn't that look great, you guys? Oh, it's so yummy. I love that color. Okay, so it's starting to feel nice and dry here. And at this point, we now can pull out our acrylic paints. So we're going to use our blue and yellow, okay? And we're going to create this really deep, beautiful holly green. So you can see it on my palette there. So what I'm going to do is give it a nice little squirt, probably a squirt and a half of blue. That makes sense. You can see that's about the size dollop you need. And then just a tad bit of yellow. We don't need a ton of yellow because we want it to be a richer green, so it's going to be more blue than yellow. Okay, so you can see just a little bit, just a dab will do ya. There you go. So that's about the ratio to blue to yellow paint you want. Okay, and then I'm going to take my little palette knife here and I'm just going to mix it on the plate, moving it back and forth, getting down to the bottom of the plate, kind of scraping it, moving it back up. And it'll take a second, but once you get there, you'll know because it's just this really beautiful, dark, rich green. And yes, we are there. Look at that color, it's gorgeous. Okay, so you're gonna have a lot of paint on the back of your knife, but just go ahead and use it. Go ahead and start laying down shapes. And so we practiced this a little bit in the beginning. On the first class, we practiced mark making. It's basically the same thing. What we're doing actually is we're creating the base for the leaves that we're gonna create later with details. So we're just putting on bulk color and just kind of different shapes and angles. Feel free to turn your palette knife around backwards, turn the page around if you want. It's just all about getting really great stark shapes and coverage on your page, because that's what's going to provide the bed for the beautiful light bright colors that we're going to lay on top later. Okay, this is so fun for me. I love when there's a little bit of like the dry page effect. And that looks really good. So I'm just gonna dry it now. And because we've put it on so thin, it's not gonna take a ton of time to dry. But you do want it to be dry to the touch. All right, so now we're gonna take our hooker's green again. And what we wanna do is kind of fill in that background a little more. I did it a little light, which I usually do it a little darker. I'm not sure why I didn't pay more attention to that, but okay. We can actually go back and fix it because, you know, you can build watercolor. So what I'm doing here is just wetting the page again, giving it a good once over in between all the bits and pieces. And what's cool is now, because that paint's on the page, it's going to create more boundaries for the water in the paint, and it's going to create more visually interesting things to look at once we get the page or the paint on the page. And because it's going to be so damp, it's just going to kind of go where it wants to go, and that's what we want. Alrighty, awesome. Now we're going to take that hooker's green again, and we're going to go in with some pretty thick paint. This isn't going to be super diluted. And we're just going to let it move where it wants, because you can see if it's pretty wet on the page, if the page is pretty wet rather, it's going to just kind of do its own thing. So that's what we want. We want it to move around. And so you just do that, concentrating on the center of the page, but definitely giving it some more color on the edges too if you feel like it. So once you've got that green where you want it, let's just go ahead and dry it. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back in with a little bit more water, okay? And not as crazy wet as we made it the last time, but what this is going to be for is are the holly berries that we're going to be painting on the page. So we want to give it a nice, especially in the background, this first layer of holly berries are going to be really more kind of just shades of holly berries, because it's going to diffuse like the green did. It's just going to kind of go sploosh. Yes, that's a technical term. It's called a sploosh. Okay, and now you can see we've got our water where we want it, and now we're going to take that alizarin red, okay, and watch. It's just going to kind of dilute wherever we put it, and that's what we want at this stage. So just go ahead and go around your page and put those dots wherever you would like them, and the more the merrier. Now once the page is dry, we're going to go in with our white acrylic and that little diamond shaped palette knife that we were using earlier for the leaves. I've cleaned that off. And what I'm going to do is take a pea-sized amount of the white acrylic paint, and I'm just going to lightly press down and drag, okay? You can see that made a beautiful little petal, like a flower petal, but I'm not pressing it all the way down to the page. I'm actually letting it hover a little bit and give it enough pressure to create a ridge in the middle, but not reveal the green underneath. So you're going to see me do it again right here with another pea-sized amount. Okay. Oh, see how it kind of, in the middle, it's real shallow, and then on the edges it kind of curls up like a flower petal does. And these are kind of like, I guess you could say, white poinsettias. If you wanted to, if you made a petal that you didn't think had enough of a point on it, you could always go back and just kind of create a point with the edge of that knife. Okay. So again, another little pea-sized amount straight out of the tube. This is actually one of those things where I'm like, you don't necessarily have to put it on the palette. Now the green, absolutely, because we had to mix it, but the white we're taking straight out of the tube. So why not? As long as the palette knife is clean, it's not a problem. So I want you to do that 4 more times. So we're going to create 4 flowers on the page, okay? And just kind of put them wherever you want to. I kind of make sure there's, some in the middle, one in the top corner, and one in the bottom left. That's kind of how I feel about it. So once we've completed those flowers, I was kind of looking at the page going, this needs a little touch of something else. And so I was like, oh, we'll do little flower buds. So go ahead and just kind of find some little random places if you want to fill it in the corners, on the sides where there's not as much going on, to give it a little visual interest. That's kind of what I was using them for. And again, you're just going in with a little pea-sized amount, maybe even less, because we're using them as kind of like a little flower bud. And we're just, boop, just placing it on the page. We're not pressing all the way down to the bottom of the paper and dragging. We're not creating like a texture that you can kind of see through to the bottom, we want these to be like really thick little flower buds, okay? And don't worry about making this perfect, because We're going to be doing so much more on the page with details later that we can kind of let this just kind of live and be what it is, because you can always fill in with more details later to balance out the page. So don't fret too much about placement when you're doing this part. Now here comes my favorite part. I love holly berries on anything Christmas. I don't know why, they just, the little red luscious little pops of color just make me so happy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in with a wet brush and some pretty thick paint, not super thin, because what we want to do is create, like I said, see, ooh, those little gorgeous pops of color. And like you did before, you're just gonna kind of put them willy-nilly wherever you want to put them. Again, this is one of those paintings where less is not more. So go ahead and put all those colors in, put them wherever you want them. And you can go straight on top of, and I wouldn't actually, so you could go in and use the first holly berries as kind of like a stencil where to put these, but I actually like leaving a lot of them as they are because it gives just one more layer of the painting to look at, because it's so beautiful and diffused and kind of in the background. So just, if you don't mind, just kind of leave it there, and then find other spaces to put in your red berries. You certainly can go over top of some of them, but I would leave some of them just as they are. So important thing here is we really want to get the acrylic as dry as we can. So we're using this to dry the berries as well, but take a moment to set that sucker on high and just hover it right over those flowers and those flower petals. We don't want the paint to move. So what we're going to do now is take our gold calligraphy ink, and I've been dying to use this since we started class. I want you to take that and put 2 drops on your palette, okay? Just not like even a dropper full, just like 2 drops, because we're not going to need a ton. All right, and then I want you to take your smallest detail brush. Doesn't have to be as fine or as tiny as the one that I use, because these don't typically come in. You have to kind of go hunt for them. They're kind of like specialty. But what I want you to do is I want you to take the smallest brush you have, and I want you to start lightly with the lightest hand, just going in and creating leaves and details on leaves, like the veins in the leaves. You could even make little solid gold leaves. So you'll see as I'm doing this, I'm creating a mix of both solid and kind of like an impression of a leaf. So I'll go where there's a nice big green splotch on the page, and I'll create, like definition right here in this leaf. Coming down, I'm creating veins that you can see. Again, this is more for visual interest, and honestly, who doesn't love to see metallic paints in a painting? Like gold is just, oh, so pretty, especially when you consider like holiday colors like the greens and reds, whites. It's just such a beautiful accent color. So go ahead and go in, and like I'm doing here, do different sizes. It really is up to you. So different sizes, different petals, and like I said, less is not more in this equation. So go and as crazy as you want with all of this gold, because I mean, seriously, like what could it hurt? Wonderful. Look at all of those gorgeous little leaves. They make me so happy. So now that we're finished with that, we're actually going to go in and after we've dried it a little bit more, that acrylic should be pretty set to where we can put some gold ink in the center of those flowers and on the tips of the petals, like kind of like a dogwood. So what I'm going to do is I'm just dropping paint. I'm tapping it, I'm not rubbing it in. You'll see just little dots appear. Okay, so just take the tip of that brush and just dot, 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 dot. And it's okay if they run together too, just as long as you have some dots there that you can see they're like different from the others. Okay, and I'm going to do that in the center of each flower. And once we've done that in each flower, we're going to move outside to the edges of the petals. Wonderful. Now, we've got all of that looking exactly how we want it. I want you to take the gold and just kind of tap, tap, tap on the center of that point of that leaf, and then just kind of take it up just slightly on the edges. I mean, you've seen a dogwood flower before, so this is pretty much what we're talking about. And we're just going to take it up, and you see how pretty that defines the flowers. It's not too much gold, and it doesn't take away from the stark white brightness of the flower itself, but it just adds a little touch of something. And there you have it. Once we've gotten the gold where we want it on the page, just hit it with that hairdryer again, and it dries that acrylic down even more, which is great. And look at that, you guys. Oh, that color is just absolutely gorgeous. I love it. And actually, I'm going to step away for a second and see if I can't open up my windows so you guys can have a little more light to see those golden hues shimmering. Because I can see it, but I don't think you guys can see it on camera. Hold on one second. There we go. Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. This is one of my favorite things that we've ever done as a class. Look at that. Ooh. Yay! It's shiny. I sound like a magpie. But here we go. Here are two beautiful, sweet, simple little holiday cards or examples of holiday cards. And maybe you can come up with something of your own. This is just a fun little exercise. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.